And thank you for coming to the Board of Education's budget presentation to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to throw it over to Phil Williams, the Chairman of the Board of Ed, and he can introduce the Superintendent of the budget presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to review the Board of Education budget for 2014-2015. The Board of Education's responsibility as town of Clinton is to provide a budget that is both fiscally and educationally sound. The district has developed a budget process that is driven by the educational needs of our students and guided by our mission statement. Through this process, each of the cost centers presented their needs-based budget, which represents the projected program.
Excuse me, Phil, with the music, it's really hard to hear you.
Through this process, each of the cost centers presented their needs-based budget, which represents the projected programmatic needs for the cost centers. The board has considered these presentations carefully and asked challenging questions of the superintendent on the compiled budget. With 4 new board members this year, it was very encouraging to see the level and depth of the questioning on the line items contained in our budget by each of the new members. We are seeing very positive improvements in the district, and the board is in unison in our desire to continue this momentum through the programs contained in our budget. So tonight, the Board of Education is respectfully asking you, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, to approve the budget after your review process tonight. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Superintendent Cross.
Thanks, Mr. Williams. So our overall budget, proposed operations budget, not counting capital, not counting debt service, is $31,502,543. It's an increase of $958,292. Looking at last year's budget to this year, including operating capital and debt service, the difference or the change amounts in the end represent $1.14 million, or about 3.6% increase. The note at the bottom is ultimately to reflect the fact that the $402,000 in capital last year was the approved amount, and then prior to the referendum, there was determination, the Board of Ed was directed to use $193 from individual funds toward capital items that would be purchased, or that could be purchased prior to June 30th. So the 402 was the actual amount that was approved, and then adjusted based on end of year funds. We've talked a little bit about the education cost sharing, and there's a little blurb at the bottom that also speaks to the minimum budget requirement that has surfaced over the course of the last couple of years. The minimum budget requirement is just that. It is a minimum that the town, it was put into place so that the town, so any town, not our town, but the town would not supplant the budget with any increases in education cost sharing. And then as that has become a flat funded element, the education cost sharing had become flat, they changed in 2005 and made some additional requirements about minimum budget requirements that you cannot, once you have established a budget, an operating budget for a particular fiscal year, then the next fiscal year can't go below that amount unless there is a decline in enrollment, and then up to a threshold, $3,000 per student can be reduced. But the reality is that the town or the state provides that MBR number when they, at the end of the legislative cycle, they indicate what that MBR is going to be. As their enrollment figure, resident students means it's all of the students that are actually enrolled in our schools, as well as any students for which we are responsible that go to magnets, that go to vocational agricultural schools, and/or that are outplaced through special ed. They all count toward our big total. This chart only reflects the kids who are enrolled effective October 1 of a given year. Okay?
In the Clinton Public Schools.
In the Clinton Public Schools. I leave you with our mission, and we'll entertain questions that you might have at this point. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. I'm sorry? Yes, ma'am.
The additional positions that you're asking for, can you just go through each one and tell us what, you can't exactly, or tell us
Approximate
exactly what
cost?
the cost
Yeah,
would be?
sure.
Can you do that?
Yeah, what we have projected is, for the 2 literacy coaches, we've taken in 60,000 is a ballpark number for each, for math and literacy coach in the high school. The guidance counselor, 55,000. Again, largely because both of them, all 3 of those positions would end up having to have a master's degree, and the guidance counselor wouldn't necessarily have to be an experienced person. We want to get the best person for the job, but that wouldn't necessarily require particular years of experience. Whereas the literacy and math coach would have to have some, at least 4 or 5 years in the classroom to demonstrate that they know what the heck they're doing. And then the team leaders, the total for that, there's 7, it's a stipended position, so based on that, it's about 28,000.
Per.
Total, no, total for all 7.
So as far as new bodies are concerned, you're saying there's an additional 3?
There are 3 certified
New
FTEs,
bodies.
new bodies. We are, again, in the budget is included, however, an additional 50,000 for the business manager, so that's a 0.5 increase in the position, and then a 0.2, essentially a 0.2 increase in the technology director to make it a full-time position, and that's about.
But these are replacements?
They're replacements, but a little bit of an expansion. Yes, sir.
Just to talk about the overall budget here, just the 3.14%, you guys feel that, I don't know how you guys can come here with a straight face and bring that in with the surpluses we've had. I mean, it's just like, I'm just saying the overall thing, and I'm not saying we don't need any of these teachers, anything. If I was setting a budget, which I do every year for my stuff, my companies, I would start with that minimum and work backwards. I would take off the 3,000 for the 40, I don't know how many kids there are, 15 kids or whatever it is, 45,000. But say you start with that, I can't even fathom how you guys can come in with almost $1 million when we have, every year we have a surplus. And substantial surplus. I mean, it was almost 900 last year, so it took 300,000 for capital. Year before, I don't know what it's talked about, but substantial amount. Then you guys come in, I
think you know why they have the surpluses, and we discussed that, and it's unforeseen things, and I don't think it's fair to all people out there
It's
that have put the
So what's the
time
history
into the
about?
budget. What?
Has it been one every time?
It's better than a deficit every time.
I'm just saying, has there been one?
Yes.
Can we take the smallest and cut it in half? How about that?
But it's been in personnel. So what do you
Well, then who's
got?
negotiating the contracts? I mean, I look at, I'm just like, it's just
What is the
like a
surplus?
fantasy book, in my
We don't have,
opinion.
at this point, I can't
Here's the
project.
thing about surpluses.
Somebody asked, what was the surplus this year?
We don't know.
Right now,
No, here's what
I
we
can't
do know.
project.
Here's what we do know, and we have the budget in front of us that has the budget and it has the actual as of now. Now, technically, that actual should be 58% of the budget, depend if it was spread evenly across the months. So some of it is not 58% right now. So maybe and some of it is a lot lower, we're spending a lot less. Some of it's at 20%, some of it's at 40%. So maybe the better question is, are there things that are not cyclical in this budget where we could actually point to some of these and say, okay, we know that 90% of that budget is spent in May. Because personnel, it should be cyclical, but some isn't. There's like professional development in here, that's a $6,000 budget, and there's been $33 spent. So those are areas that maybe we could cut, so when you see that, and then you see another $6,000, you know, so what is not cyclical? What are you expecting to spend that's not spread, you know, 1/12
But
every month?
just one thing, though, like you have here for last year, that's the budget number, but then you go to the audit number, it's 29 million, whatever, I mean, there's another, that's $715,000 difference than what you guys have written here to what we actually is on our, what they actually had in the audit.
So that's a valid question, but you know, so you should just ask the question rather than say,
Well, I'm
you
getting
can't
there.
come in here as with a straight face.
Well,
And
maybe
what
if
if
you let me
they're
get to
wrong?
it, Val, I didn't give a chance, I was gonna, and I understand maybe I didn't word it correctly, and you said it wrong, but I'm saying there's things like that that just, I looked through it quickly. We just got these things, but it,
The two areas
seems crazy.
that over the last, and, you know, and I have to agree that I have a hard time looking at the experiences that we've had with regard to the number of retirements over the course of the last 3 years. Because the retirement number and the insurance savings are two things that I don't have a guarantee on. I have one retirement at this point. So again, to Val's point, I have to calculate based on what I have. What I do have, and what I have done over the last several years, is to do some trending of who's eligible to retire. And that doesn't always happen. People who are, you know, we've been all over the place in terms of teachers who were eligible and stayed on 2 or 3 extra years. Teachers who were not, you know, that from my vantage point wouldn't have been eligible, chose to retire for either health or spousal reasons or whatever. But the reality is that looking at that trend, the number of potential retirements are much smaller this year than they have been over the last 3 years, which accounted for at least half or better of the surplus. The second piece is that we, you know, to your point of negotiating the contracts, and I take umbrage with the insinuation that we're not doing our freaking jobs, is that the negotiated agreements over the course of each of the last bargaining units have been under 3% for each of those bargaining units on an annual basis. And it is a collective bargaining process. We don't get to just say, you're only going to get 0% or 1%.
I wouldn't say it's 0%.
But the point is that we've negotiated those along the lines of the way that we're supposed to do it, and they are binding. We don't have any choice about that. We go forward with trying to bring the cost factors down as much as possible. The second piece along those negotiated lines has to do with the insurance. And because of the way we negotiated the insurance plans for each of those bargaining units, all 4 groups now are on the same plan, and we have realized much greater savings than anyone could have predicted because we changed the dynamics. And we realized those, and guess what? The town got it back. You know, it's not like, we're anticipating.
But I'm saying then the minimum goes up every year.
Look at the insurance budget. The insurance budget is flat funded this year again. I don't know. I don't have a new number yet. It might be 5%, it might be 6% increase over last year.
And you're trending exactly what you budgeted,
Right.
based on your monthly costs. I checked it today.
So, I mean, we have cut insurance by over $1 million, almost $2 million, since I took over. So, yeah, it could be $2 million more. And I wouldn't have had any control over that if we hadn't done anything with insurance. So the budget you're looking at, I agree. 3% compared to what we've done the last few years seems high. But before I took over, you were looking at 5 and 6 and 7%. What have you seen over the last 5 years? This is the biggest increase that you've seen in the last 5 years, and we've identified specific needs that we have for the budget. That's what I've got to come forward advocating for what I believe is important for our district and for the community. And we've cut, and we've cut, and we've cut everywhere we could.
But Jack, you are increasing your personnel by 3 people here.
Yes, we
4
are.
people.
Identified
4 people.
needs.
And that is very hard to justify when you're looking at a decrease in enrollment of approximately 100 kids over the
And
last 3
increased
years.
demands from the state and feds.
I think we should also remind people too of the last budget hearing where we did hear lots of people come out and ask for an increase. They actually articulated very well of what we need in our school system, what the parents want in our school system. And they talked about people who are doing three jobs.
Wanting that they are not receiving.
Enrichment programs, talented and gifted,
Okay,
that's
well,
in there.
that
They want
is
another
not-
guidance counselor.
That's not covered by a literacy coach or
It's
a
one of
math
his
coach.
things.
one of
That's
his
covered by
initiatives.
the
initiatives in there.
Pearson enhancement.
We also have an elected board of education of citizens who sit here and vet the budget that's presented to them, that go to multiple meetings every month, I mean, I don't look at a 3.14% increase and think of it as crazy.
I look at $1 million and think that that's a lot of money.
When you have a surplus. I'm not
I
saying Val,
don't understand the bullseye on the surplus, because, so what do you expect them to come
I'm
with
just saying, every time, that
$20,000?
means our minimum goes up every year, it doesn't matter
So
what.
what would happen if there was a deficit? It can't be a deficit.
It can be, but then they gotta come.
They
before
gotta
the
get
board of
money.
selectmen, finance meeting.
How many
We're
deficits
not
have we
anywhere
had?
near.
Or even close.
Our
We did 100,000.
We got
One to have
Not
one.
Board of Ed.
Ten years?
over town budget, overall, the entire budget was a deficit.
Plus it encourages.
Oh, then the
Well,
town
we
side,
already
put it
money
on
every
here.
We had a deficit we've had a deficit last couple of years.
Right, so come back and get more money then.
No,
Right.
what Tom's pointing out is during the course of the year, we appropriate money from our fund balance during the course of the year. So actually, by the end of the day, our overall budget
We increased it.
was
by
increased.
$2 million.
Correct, because of appropriations out of fund. Although some of it was for the storm, which got stuck into the wrong area of the budget, but
But it's an operating deficit last year.
I think, part of the problem that I'm hearing from everybody is everybody's got beef about the surplus.
I don't know if we've
I
got
don't
surplus,
either.
I don't about deficit.
All right, so
I say thank you for returning it and thank you for managing the money. That's the thing.
you do the very best of the information that you've given. Okay, John, to your point, from coming in with a 3.14% increase, if you looked at the numbers, the vast majority of that is in personnel costs, which are all under contract. And I sat on those negotiation committees, and we fought to keep the increases to the bare minimum without having to go to arbitration. And some of them we had to go to arbitration, which cost us tens of thousands of dollars to do. So if you get to the point where, okay, we'll agree to a 2%, a 2.8% increase versus spending $50,000 in attorney's fees to go and fight it through arbitration. And then you stand a high risk of losing it because everybody else in the state is getting 3 to 4% increases. So we negotiate to the very best of our abilities to keep the cost at a bare minimum and still maintain a decent educational system.
All right. I think that point is taken and understood, but the big picture is, we're looking at a $31 million budget, and we have a $65 million school coming home to roost in the next 2 years and a declining school population. And to be increasing the personnel of the school system right now to the tune of $300,000. I mean, when you add in $20,000 for technology, $50,000 for the business manager, 2 coaches, the guidance counselor. I think at this point in time, we have to be a little bit more thoughtful about increasing administrative costs in the education budget. I think there's going to be a huge response when that school gets added into the town budget. And I think being proactive now and keeping a hard line on the education budget will go a long way towards getting those budgets passed in the future. I mean, there's a limit to how much this town can afford. 13,000 people here, 2,000 of which are students in the school system. I mean, that's not a lot of taxpayers to foot this bill. We have to be extremely conscious of what we're asking for them, and that debt is going to increase by about 10% in the next few years with the school bonding coming up. So, I mean, we all have our wish lists, and we have our want lists, and we have our need lists. I think we have to pay a lot of attention to the need list
Well, when we get
versus
down to the
the
needs
want
list,
list.
is it a need for the community to be able to graduate students from our high schools that can go to,
But how is that any different from last year or the year before?
You gotta let it finish.
Before? How is that any different? That's not something that's just looming on the horizon. That's always been there, I hope.
Well, I think with the math.
yeah, if you let me finish.
Yeah, you gotta let them finish.
Is it the desire and the needs of the community to graduate students that can go to college, whatever type of college that they want to go to, whether it is a tier 3, 2, or 1, and not have difficulties in being able to assimilate into those classes? We're hearing back from some of the universities in the state that the kids that they're getting into the colleges need remediation because they don't know how to do certain things. And that's why you have these coaches.
Why isn't that being addressed on the level of the personnel that we have at this point? I mean, is that a ridiculous question?
Yeah, no, that's not where it needs to be addressed. In my opinion, it needs to be addressed back at the family level. Because
You can always do that. You can always do
you
that.
can always do that, but if we look at what the state is imposing upon the school districts all across this state of Connecticut and the nation from the federal government, they're telling us that we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to make sure that all of our programs meet a set standard. And a lot of the kids that are coming in are not even able to read when they come into the doors of the school. And that is because the parents are spending either more time away from the children because they have to work so much to be able to afford things, or they don't care and they've abdicated their responsibilities. Jack has put together with
So
his
when you say a
administration-
child can't read when they come to school, isn't that what they're coming to school for?
If you want to abdicate the responsibility to raise the children, then yeah, we need to have budgets like this to be able to deal with those children that come to class that aren't prepared.
I think
And
that,
we have,
I think that, you know,
You can't
What am I
continue to do
missing?
that.
I want to put a finer point on what we have identified as a need and why these positions are there. And also the fact that the work that we have done over the last 5 years has truly had benefit. We have reframed the work that we do with our instructional coaches at the elementary level to reduce the number of students who go on from one level to the next, not having the skill set they need. We still continue to get students coming to us that are not entering in kindergarten and first grade, but come in at 5th grade, come in at 7th grade, come in at the high school. We have an increasing number of students who are coming from, that come without any English at all. We're looking at how best to address those needs across the district. We have a K-8 intervention program that is working for the most part. Always can be improved. We have a very limited intervention model at the high school, and we're trying to address that. And that becomes a priority. The instructional staff, and again, I think the issue is that, you know, as the expectations for staff increase in terms of their instructional practice, we ramp up our professional development, but we also need to be able to do some of that embedded ongoing training. Again, the coach and interventionists provide a double-edged sword of being able to go in and model for our content area teachers how to embed literacy development in the science, in the math, in the social studies areas, in all the areas where kids need to be reading and analyzing in all of those areas. And it's very different than it is for reading a narrative or a literary piece to reading a science text. The fact is that to Phil's point, we are increasingly seeing improvement in our students across the board. Our test scores are showing that.
We have some of those statistics.
Not as, still not as effervescent as I'd like, but we're making progress. We're seeing, I mentioned, we doubled the number of students taking AP courses and UConn courses, so we're pushing that level of challenge.
Jen, just off the top of your head, do you know the percentage of Morgan graduates that go on to further education? You have a...
I don't have a percentage for you. We were just looking at the fact that in this last group, in the last graduating class, 111 kids went on to 2 and 4 year schools out of that graduating class. About 1/3.
It's about 1/3.
And of those, about 70 of them went to Tier 1 schools. About 26 or 7 went to community college or technical schools, and then the remaining fall in between the Tier 2 schools. So we have a pretty good track record. We're looking at graduation rates, 4-year cohort graduation rates that are 92 and 93%. 10 kids that aren't graduating with the class out of a class of 130, 131. But we know why. They're either special ed kids or they didn't have enough credits in the course of 3 but they're graduating in the 5th year. So, and I can't recite the dropout rate off the top, but our graduation rate is right smack dab in the middle of our dirt, from the low at 86 to the high at 95. Not doing so bad, but the issues that we're targeting are the things that are going to take us to that next step. That are going to help make sure that all of our kids are ramping up to that next level, so that we're not leaving any kids behind, and we close this proverbial achievement gap. But it takes more than just the classroom teacher every day that we do. And on one level, I could come in and say, sorry that we're looking at a 3.1% increase. And from a dollar standpoint, I wish I could figure out a way to do it for less money. But from the needs of our kids, that's what we believe we need at this point in order to move forward. And if I get a whole bunch of retirements, and we end up with knowing that our cost or our personnel is going to go down, then so be it. Then we can say, here's what we got that you can expect for the town to get back. But I can't do that without that information. I can't, because the 2 areas that are where the surplus is coming, again, personnel, retirements, and insurance. I don't believe we're going to see additional savings in insurance this year. I don't know that yet. We don't have those final numbers, but the projections around the state are high single digits again, and we're looking at trying to level fund it and hold that. And with personnel again, if I knew in advance that we are going to have 5 or 6 or 7, then we could cut that margin in terms of what I project for personnel in the following year. We haven't convinced anybody, especially in the teachers union, that telling us in advance of the budget is useful for us, useful for them at this point.
Well, I think that the new positions that they're requesting actually hit on your point exactly. I mean, these aren't new positions intended to help people get to college. They're guidance and math intervention specialists and literacy intervention specialists. These are to help those people who are having trouble. And I think people who sit on the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, who are not only concerned about education but also on the town, need to recognize some of those factors that make this town, they call it a vibrant community, right? You make this town a vibrant community when you can show that you're taking care of the kids, and that's what the current math intervention specialist is doing. They're helping the teachers and they're helping those kids, and they're seeing, a decrease in the amount of kids who are dropping off that spectrum, and they're working with them, and increased test scores and graduation rates and college rates, and all goes to the reputation of a town. And when that reputation gets better, it becomes a vibrant community, a place where people do want to live and do want to send their kids to school. Once you have those people coming in, then you have an economy, and then you have businesses that want to come because you have the people that are living here that can go and spend money in the downtown. I mean, that's what we're all thinking of, and I don't think you should forget that schools and investing in schools is part of that. And again, to just say, how can you ask for $1 million when you've had, these blanket statements is, I find, completely insulting to all of the work that each individual school came in. And I don't know if any of you have gone to the individual budget workshops where each individual school prepared a PowerPoint that's all online that said, here's what we need and here's why we need it. And again, the Board of Education, looked at that and vetted it. I mean, for us to just say, how dare you come in, for the $1 million. I mean, they're not just coming in at $1 million. They're saying, here's what we need to help our students, to help our teachers. And so I don't think that we should just blow that.
It's less than $1 million.
Maybe you took what I said wrong. I mean, for all that stuff, actually, I utilized it when I was in high school for special needs stuff. So I'm not saying that way. I'm just saying that I think there's different ways to approach a budget, and I would just start from the back and work forward. I don't think we should lose any positions. I'd like to see these added. It's not what I'm saying. And I'm not saying it's easy, Jack, and I apologize if I came across, like I didn't think anybody put anything. Carol's thing, it's tough for, especially people like myself that have multiple businesses in town. And with all these things coming on the horizon, it's getting tougher and tougher. Like Phil was saying, because the parents are out working and stuff, they're not, because we are paying high taxes and all the different stuff that we have to do. It's very difficult to have a business, and you got to think with the, I see around here, there's people here that have business. It's tough, and you want to. It's just tough to swallow. And we have this looming, the school, the sewers, whatever it may be. It's getting very difficult to live here. And I've been here my whole life. I've had my business here for 25 years. And my kids growing up here, so it's not like I haven't seen the highs and lows of this community. And I went to school here, and it's tough to swallow when you see. And I apologize, Jack, if it came across just crass, like what the hell did you put $1 million on for it? But they say every household or whatever, it's X amount of dollars. Well, when there's people that have businesses and own multiple stuff here, it's not that. It's a huge increase. So it's just.
So where we are now then is, it's up to us to then, if you don't agree with it, to suggest what.
No, I know, and we just got this stuff, and I want to look through it, and maybe the way I came off with
That's next week, and then the rest of you.
And, I don't want to put that you guys can think about it, or you guys don't care. Of course you do. And I want the best for the students too. I mean, my daughter goes to school here. I mean, but I just think we have to think about the people too.
I have something to say about something that has nothing to do with the classroom, the addition of classroom personnel. The $110,000 for the business administrator. This board, within the past year, spent $235,000 on new accounting software. We haven't got it up and running yet, but it will be in July. It'll streamline the accounting process, it'll make things more transparent, centralize it, and cut costs. Our auditor has advised that it would be a great thing to consolidate the finance management for both the Board of Education and the town. We spent $1 million on the annex for brand new offices for $2 million. For offices, specifically for the... I just wonder how prudent it is at this point to say we need this extra person without having seen what the implications of all of these expenses in this new software is.
Well, we have discussed at great length this position and the benefits that it's going to bring to the Board of Ed by being able to have the superintendent and several other administrators spend their time doing the job of education and not doing the job of crunching numbers. The amount of work and time that Superintendent Cross has put into this budget for the last 5 years, where we've had one shared person.
Well, that's why we spent this 235 million, so easy to print reports.
No, 235,000.
235,000, excuse me.
Right, and it's
Easy
not
to
there
print
yet.
reports.
That's a different typo.
And
Late, sorry.
there's nothing to show that having new software and still one shared person is going to give us any more benefit.
Exactly, my point. There is no point, I mean, at this stage, you're kind of got 1 foot on one side of the bridge and one on the other. I'm wondering how it was demonstrated in dollars and cents, what
The need for us to have a business
because of
manager.
all of these other steps that the town has taken, makes,
It's,
I don't understand.
it's at least 1/3 of his time spent working on budgets. This is not just a process that starts in October, as the calendar shows, and ends tonight after this presentation. This is something that goes on throughout the entire year. The board is constantly working with the superintendent on trying to make sure that we can contain the cost to the best of our abilities and still improve the educational process in the district. And when he is spending the majority of, or a third of his time at least, on crunching numbers, where if we had a business manager, over half of that time can then be released back into working in the system as an educational professional and not somebody that is a business manager. He has been acting as the quasi-business manager.
Someone's got to, the numbers have to come from somewhere. I assume that superintendents crunch numbers, that's part of their job description.
They do crunch numbers, but it's not, okay. To give you an analogy, in the business world, in your business, in my business, I've got auditors and I've got accountants.
So, yeah.
Okay? I know the numbers, and I expect Mr. Cross to know the numbers when we have the business manager in place. But I'm not the one that sits there crunching those numbers.
No, but
Okay?
our history has been that we've had one person that.
And that
does
one
both.
person has never worked effectively because they can't put up with the total amount of work. When you have the requirements,
I don't understand the statement. They haven't worked effectively, and the budgets haven't been done?
why have we lost two in
This is the second year that the superintendent and the first selectman have.
Third year.
Is it third year in a row?
Yeah.
Not in a row.
Third
Two in
year
a
out
row.
of the last four
2 in a row.
after, yeah, because Kevin came in at the late end and then there was 1 year, right. So that's daunting. Well, we're at the doorstep of a $50 million a year operating budget.
Correct. That doesn't mean anything as far as,
Primarily being,
dollars are the dollars, whether it's 100 million or 50, it doesn't matter.
it comes down to who's overseeing it.
Who's paying the bill is what
And it's
matters.
and it's oversight.
The size of our operation, although dollar-wise has increased, we haven't increased facilities, we actually reduced our facilities to an extent. We haven't increased the size of our staff, particularly on the town side, so I don't see the need to expand into all these other areas.
Bureaucracy.
No added
Mandates
services.
from the
Yeah,
state.
if we want to be in the state of Connecticut or want to be in Washington, we could do that, but we don't operate like that around here. I think ultimately the finance director has to have oversight of the business person at the Board of Ed, because ultimately the finance director is responsible for the audit. And that's what we discussed when we met in December at the Board of Ed with Phil and Leah, Dennis, and Carol, and Jack. But we're going to have more meetings about how it's going to be set up.
We're having a semantic argument.
Right, at this point, we're hoping we can find somebody who can do one job right now. And hang on to whoever it is for more than 8 months or a year and a half, whatever it is.
We had someone too young, we had
At the end of the
someone.
day, the Board of Ed does what it does when it gets its money.
Right.
You know, I mean, what we're trying to do is just avoid any kind of problems as we go
So
into
somebody
future years.
somebody over here knows what's going to and do tos and do froms and this and that, and I think we're getting away from the one bank account. Again, thank God.
I don't have any questions, I'm good. So any other questions? I mean, it's a workshop, so if there's no other questions, we'll convene the meeting, we'll end the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Yes.
This is, obviously, it's a special meeting, we gotta stick to the agenda. Because of the snow Wednesday, I think it was a pretty good call to cancel that meeting. And then, I was gonna try to have it yesterday, but then there was another meeting we were supposed to have in the morning yesterday that got canceled for some reason, but I don't know. All right, visitors, anybody? Mr. Carr?
I know you've got a full schedule, so I'll try to keep it brief. The great American poet Edna St. Vincent Millay once said that life is not one damn thing after another, it's the same damn thing over and over. I suspect you feel somewhat the same way about Board of Education presentations. The presentation last night, I mean, I think you were exactly right when you said that this is outrageous to come in with a 950. I'm sorry that you apologized. I think Valerie was exactly wrong and Brad was exactly wrong. If they're not supposed to, if they're only supposed to rubber stamp this, then this whole process is a charade. And it's really important that you ask these questions. The voters last year, overwhelmingly, 15% margin, said no to a 1% increase. What are they going to say about a 3% increase? So this is crazy. I don't know what's in those cookies that they're eating at the Board of Education, but this is outrageous that they would even bring something like this forward. It's not even a plausible starting point for a negotiation. I mean, it's embarrassing. So, thank you.
Thanks, Carr.
Kirk, I wanted to say that I didn't mean to apologize in the way of what I thought or what I stated, just the way I went about it, I guess would be I still fully believe that it's outrageous. And the more I look through it, again, and I no disrespect to the police, but it's kind of like the same thing. It's like we need more people in the classrooms. That's their problem right now. I agree with that. And maybe not as many people, in the administrative parts. So, and it'd be great if we could have all of them, but right now, I think they should have, and if you look, it seems like they're very heavy in that instead of teachers. Now, if we...
2.8% raises
Oh.
for the teachers. Holy cow.
But if you looked at some of the principals and assistant
Yeah, I know, even
principals,
worse.
Yeah, 4% for the.
5.1, I mean, it's tough to look at some of those.
Especially the money they're making already.
Yeah, the enrollment's dropping.
Right. And, those things represent someone that's, I mean, I'm not saying they shouldn't get maybe the 2% like we tried to do here, but they should, that means they're doing something above and beyond to get something like, it's like, what are they doing above and beyond that they warrant some of these raises? And realistically, we're scrapping we're trying to beat this down for police, fire, whatever.
Couple thousand here, couple thousand there.
Basically, at the end, it's pennies compared to the dollars over there. And it just seems, and of course I want the schools to be as good as they can be, but sometimes you can't, that's what it's budget. Sometimes you can't afford it until we, and I don't know, it's just frustrating. And I don't know, I just think they go about the budget incorrectly. I'm not saying we don't need some of these things, and we do, but there's a lot of money in there that seems to be, could we go to different spots, and do we really need instead of having assistants, like when they say assistant principal, like Clem, I don't even know who it is, and I'm not taking any way from that person, but why can't we just have an administrator of some sort, instead of paying a salary of $120-something thousand, when you really, I'm sure there's not too many disciplinary problems. It's only up to 3rd grade. And if there is, I don't understand how a teacher or somebody couldn't take it, because it's got to be very minimal. So why couldn't you, what's that person doing? Are they doing disciplinary stuff? Like I could see in the high school that, assistant principal usually takes care of that part of it, but they must be doing administrative stuff. And you really need to pay them $120-something thousand a year. When the guy retired, I don't know how many years ago, the assistant principal retired. I'm saying, okay, that's whatever, good, now let's get down to 1. Pearson only has a principal, doesn't have an assistant principal. And why don't we just get someone to help administratively, And all of a sudden, we're back up to that thing, and then there's a contract, and they gotta get their raises, and all of a sudden they're up to $125,000 for an assistant principal. I mean, compared to the guy that's running the town at a 80-something thousand a year, it's mind-boggling to me that what these people get paid, you know, and we sit here, beat the heck out of every person that comes in front of us, and they seem to be able to, you know, I look like a bad guy if I say I don't agree with what they're proposing. And we don't even have a check to go line item by line item. I mean, we could just suggest and say what we want.
They said they care more, throw a number.
And,
Let them figure it out.
you know, but I don't, and I'm not taking anything against the Board of Finance, but they'll just say, if we take off 500, they're gonna give me 400. So, someone, you know, and then you look like the bad guy, and you're against the kids and stuff. It has nothing to do with the
Right.
kids. It has to do
You're
with
against the kids.
And they showed it on their charts where all the money goes to. But it's just very difficult for us to keep absorbing this, especially as small business, which is the heart of this town. And the families I've seen here that stay here and work here and have their businesses here and their families here, it's taken a toll on us. And it's just, you know, how much more can we take? And it's just tough to see it. You know, they say every little average household, but when you have a business and
Oh, yeah,
several
multiple properties,
properties,
right?
it hurts every time it goes up, even if the mill rate goes up a half a point. You know, it's a big chunk. We're not getting any more for our rentals, we're not getting any more for our business, we're not getting any more for our work that we do right now. But they get their increase every year, and instead of trying to work with what they should be working with, and I'm not even saying take away the money that, even though the enrollment's going down, and you could take the 3,000 at a maximum away per student, I'm not even saying that, just stay at zero flat. And then work from there, make it work. I have to make my budget work every year, because we're not getting any money.
That was what was frustrating about the presentation last night, was the fact that the enrollment figures just are declining by
I think those are a
at
little
least
deceiving.
1% a year.
I think those are deceiving, though, a little bit. I mean, I understand
They
where
are,
you look
and
at it,
they're not.
it's birth rate. Doesn't mean that people don't move in after they have a kid.
Right.
So,
I'm
and it is
looking
going
at
down, but.
At the numbers, at the factual numbers, which is the only proof that we have of what they're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at the projections where it says it's gonna be down in like 1,834 students, I think it was, by 2012. I mean, by 2020. It just, I would like to see the Board of Ed just have more transparency. The fact that they wait until their budget is passed and the budget goes into effect July 1st and they give the superintendent his raise in the first couple of weeks of July, I think that is dead wrong.
Remember, I got in trouble for saying that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah, you're not allowed to bring that out and make that public information. But that is, I think that's deceitful, and I think that's the kind of thing that people should pay attention to. That life goes on no matter what happens with the budget. They get what they want. I was very disappointed to see them broadening the administrative aspect of the education budget, bringing in more professionals, coaches and stipends for team leaders, and another guidance counselor. Why would they add another guidance counselor?
That's probably the only thing I agree with.
I definitely.
Really?
Yeah, at the high school, yeah, I think that's probably the only thing I agree with.
Aren't there three?
Two,
They definitely.
and
need
it's
another guidance
a
counselor.
clerical person.
There are not three
No.
guidance counselors at Morgan?
They need a guidance counselor.
Dan, remember Dan retired, and that's why the salary is different, because Dan
Oh,
was
they
showing.
didn't replace
They
him?
replaced him, they brought somebody in new that at a much lower rate, that's what he was alluding to last
So are there two or
night.
are there
There's
three?
two,
I mean, that's
only two.
55,000 out of,
Right.
you know, The only thing, I mean,
Well, I thought they
definitely
were
agree
going
with the
from
extra
3 to
bucks.
4.
No.
Okay.
One has from A to
Right.
J in the alphabet, the other's got J to
Okay, well,
whatever.
when my kids were there were 3.
Yeah,
Yes.
three were.
Yeah.
But there's two there.
Okay, well, then maybe that's warranted. I think the discussion over there, having a business manager who's being offered more money than you get for this position in the town, that needs exploring.
We're
Big
gonna have
time.
another sit
Yeah.
down.
All right, so, anything else? That's all I got.
Okay. All right.
Oh, you got.
Motion to adjourn.
Better
So
have
moved.
one.
In favor? Aye. You did what?
They tried to make one, and it was not.
Oh, man, I was